I'm sorry to say, she's passed away. I had been prepared for this moment since she was born. Yet, when the time to say goodbye actually comes, it hurts so much. Just yesterday, we were talking. She was showing me her smile. My daughter, Sarah, was diagnosed with pediatric leukemia shortly after birth and had been undergoing treatment. But despite all efforts, we couldn't cure her, and today, she has passed away. She was 3 years old. Thank you so much for everything. You've worked so hard to try to treat my daughter, and I'm truly grateful. Since we found out my daughter had pediatric leukemia, the doctor had been tirelessly treating her. He never gave up hope, desperately trying to cure her. Originally, it's a disease with a high mortality rate, so we were told from the start that she might pass away. But it was still too soon. I cried out loud as I clung to my daughter's body. Then, she was placed in a coffin. With the news of my daughter's passing, my in-laws, my father, and my mother all came to my childhood home, tears flowing as they looked at the coffin where my daughter lay. Sarah must have had a tough time since she was born, but she fought hard, didn't she? It wouldn't have been surprising if she had passed away even earlier, right? Yeah, the doctor said it. Finding a donor was tough, and she might have passed away before turning 3. That's right, then she lived a long life, didn't she? In the midst of all the relatives gathering, the atmosphere became solemn. However, amidst this, 2 people started a conversation that seemed to break the solemn mood. Long time no see, Harry. How have you been? I was worried since I hadn't seen you around. Hey, Anna. I thought I'd been around my home quite often, what's up all of a sudden? Hey, don't start that kind of talk in the middle of all this. Save it for later. The 2 of them had been drinking and making a racket together since the wake. Even though I've known them since high school, it's no excuse for their blatantly inappropriate behavior. Especially in front of me. And the next day, as we arrived at the funeral home to prepare for the funeral, those 2 were nowhere to be found. When I went to check the waiting room, I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband and sister were in the midst of an affair. What are you doing here? I never imagined they would do such a thing on the day of my daughter's funeral, and anger welled up inside me. I sneaked into the waiting room, took their clothes, and locked the door. Maybe I should just throw these clothes away. Driven by my anger, I threw their clothes out of a nearby window. It had been pouring rain since the morning. Even if the clothes were found, they would be too soiled to wear. Serves you right. Thinking this, I called my parents and in-laws to the front of the waiting room to inform them of what had happened. Gathering both sets of parents in front of the door, I decided to expose the 2 publicly. My name is Mirabelle, and I have a twin sister. My sister and I got along well and always played together from a young age, sharing similar thoughts. But my sister was always more sociable and charming than me, often more popular. How come we have the same face, but there's such a big difference in how much we're liked? Why is that? Maybe it's because you're not as charming, you're quite aloof, aren't you? Just like Dad. My sister would say that, but is that really the case? Sure, I'm not good at communication and struggle to talk to people, but my sister can chat with anyone without any hesitation. She's always smiling and has a great way with people. Sure, I get why she's considered attractive, but I couldn't shake the feeling there was something else behind my sister's popularity. But you know, I've been told you're more likable than me. What do you mean? I don't know, every guy I break up with tells me they prefer Mirabelle, what's up with that? Indeed, my sister was popular. Initially, everyone liked her and she would quickly make friends and start relationships, but they never lasted long. It turns out, at the end of these relationships, they all say they preferred me, and it's because of my sister's bad personality. Why do you always play pranks like that, Anna? It's not fair to Mirabelle. Apologize. When we were kids, it seemed my sister didn't like that our grandparents favored me over her, so she would often hit me or make me fall and cry. As we got into junior high school, my sister suddenly started to become popular. But when boyfriends would leave her, they'd say I prefer Mirabelle, and she would get jealous and complain to me every time. Why do you get liked by everyone without even trying? It's so annoying, especially since you're so introverted. From that point on, my sister began to see me as an enemy and hardly spoke to me. Yet, she continued to have many boyfriends and play the field. She looked down on me because she thought she was prettier than me. There was a time when I even asked her for advice on confessing to someone. In high school, I had a crush on a classmate named Harry, and wondered if there was a way to start dating him. But having lived a life devoid of boys until then, I had no idea what to do and, reluctantly, turned to my sister for advice. "I like Harry, can you tell me how to approach him?" I tried asking my sister, but she just scowled and dismissively said, "Figure it out yourself," not giving me the time of day. Guess I picked the wrong person to confide in. What should I do? In the end, I never confessed my feelings in high school, and I thought that love had ended in unrequited love. But when I went to college, the person I liked ended up going to the same college, and unexpectedly, we got close, became friends, and naturally started dating. Let's move in together. We were in college then, and I was thrilled when he suggested it, so I decided to move in with him, and we lived together until graduation. Let's get married after we graduate. We made that promise, and then, 4 years into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. Although we hadn't graduated yet, he proposed to me then. "I will continue to love you, and our baby in your belly, forever. So, let's get married." 2 months after finding out about the pregnancy, on our graduation day, he and I got married. After getting married, we continued to live in the apartment we had been sharing, and a few months later, our child was born. But soon after birth, the child was diagnosed with pediatric leukemia, and the doctors told us their life might be short. Is there really nothing that can be done after they've just been born? There are treatments available that can prolong life. However, this disease often has a high chance of not going away. We'll do our best. It might even be cured, so please don't give up hope. The doctor said this to me then, and I held on to hope for my child. There were times when it seemed hopeless, as a donor was hard to find. There's a chance they might not live until 2. We were told this at one point. But my daughter managed to live another year from then, and passed away at the age of 3. It was an early death, but I convinced myself that it was the fate she was born with and sent her soul off. When I was in college, my sister was already working. After I met Harry in college and we started living together, for some reason, my sister started coming to our house more frequently. "Long time no see, Harry. How have you been?" "Oh, I thought you were Mirabelle for a second, but it's Anna. It's been a while." My sister always wears revealing clothes when she comes to the apartment, trying to appeal to Harry. I wasn't too concerned about her usual choice of revealing clothes, but it started to bother me how she'd always come over wearing a lot of perfume, making me suspicious of her intentions. "I mean, you're always wearing those revealing clothes. It makes it awkward for us. Can you stop?" "Seriously, why do you always wear stuff like that?" "I can't help it, these are the only clothes I have, and besides, I'm meeting my boyfriend after this." My sister would say this while proudly showing her body. Wearing clothes that show off her cleavage, short skirts, clothes that make my husband struggle to keep his eyes in the right place, she boldly sit right in front of Harry. Ever since junior high school, I despised my sister's attitude, convinced she was up to something, and I was desperate to protect Harry. "She's kind of pushy, what does she want?" At the time, Harry seemed indifferent to my sister's presence, which reassured me. But I was wrong. Whether those words were an act or not, I can't say, but around that time, Harry and my sister had started an affair. A few months later, after finding out I was pregnant, Harry proposed, and we got married. It happened right after that. I've decided to get married. I received a sudden call like that from my sister. And the partner was Tom, a friend who used to be in the same club as Harry and her back in the day. "No way, Anna's marrying Tom. Why?" It was naturally surprising because it was a marriage between classmates. Moreover, this happened 6 months after we got married. Seeing how happy you looked, Mirabelle, made me think I had to hurry up and get married too. I liked Tom from the baseball team, so we were dating, and then we just got married. So, Anna was into Tom, huh? My husband's face clouded over at this news for some reason. I didn't understand why he'd be upset over my sister's marriage announcement at the time, but that would become clear later. It's been a while, hasn't it? We haven't seen each other much since I got married. Really, when was the last time? Never thought we'd be reuniting like this, and now you're my brother-in-law, so let's get along. Hey, you two got married before me, what about my situation? Terry has been a friend of my sister, my brother-in-law Tom, and me since childhood, and met my husband Harry in high school, becoming a close trio, often hanging out together. So, at my sister's wedding, this trio reunited after a long time and promised to hang out again, creating opportunities for them to meet up as a group of 3. Following this, my husband started going out frequently and coming home late at night. But whenever he came back, he'd be wearing a scent of perfume. Why would he smell like perfume if he was just hanging out with friends? It bothered me, so I confronted my husband about it. Hey, have you been smelling like perfume lately? I'd sniff his clothes, and he'd always come back with a panicked face saying, Terry's been bringing his new girlfriend around a lot recently. Maybe it's her perfume you're smelling? It smells like women's perfume, but this scent, I feel like I've smelled it before. When I said that, my husband quickly left the room and changed his clothes as if hiding something. The smell of perfume shouldn't matter, I'm going to take a shower anyway. He said that and went off to take a shower. I had started to feel suspicious around this time. He said he was going out to hang out with Terry, but occasionally, when I'd visit my parents' house, I'd find Tom there, and there were often times when Anna wasn't around. Huh? Didn't Harry say he was going out to hang out with Tom and Terry today? Why are you here at the parents' house? I haven't been told anything about it. And I haven't seen my sister around either. What's that about? Doesn't it seem suspicious? Around that time, my brother-in-law and I started to suspect their actions and began taking steps to find out the truth. It happened one day. After my daughter passed away, I noticed the 2 of them had disappeared during the funeral, and I went out to look for them. That day, my brother-in-law Tom had an unavoidable business trip and couldn't attend the funeral, and despite knowing the situation, Anna showed up in revealing clothes as if she didn't care. Why don't you have any decent clothes? It's a funeral. Why are you wearing something like that? Take it off right now. I'll lend you something. It's fine, really. These are the only types of clothes I have. I didn't buy any morning clothes, and it's just for today, let it be. Anna forcefully brushed off our mother's objections and managed to get through the event, but our mother was appalled by her behavior. She had always had moments of being unreasonable, but to go this far, our mother gave up saying, "Do whatever you want." At that moment, I was certain. The perfume Anna was wearing was the same scent my husband Harry would come home with after hanging out with Terry. My suspicion that these 2 were having an affair turned into a firm conviction. And then, during the funeral arrangements, they disappeared. I had a hunch where the 2 might have gone. Those 2 are definitely up to something in some hidden spot, they're busted. I'll find them and confront them. I couldn't find them in the men's restroom or the other waiting room on the 2nd floor. Where could they have gone? Just as I decided to go back to our family's waiting room to start searching from there again, I heard questionable noises coming from inside. Hey, I'm definitely more attractive and better than Mirabelle, right? Truly, you're the best. Unlike Mirabelle, you have a nicer figure. So, come on, push harder, let's have a child together. That's risky, what if we get caught? We'll manage somehow, Tom is easy to fool. And Mirabelle is so clueless, she won't realize what's happening. I could hear such a conversation through the door of the waiting room. What are those 2 thinking? It's the worst. It sounded like they were about to start something, with noises of clothes being taken off coming from inside. As I listened closely, I heard Anna's voice say, "We better move further back, if our voices can be heard, it would be bad," and their footsteps moved away from the entrance. After a while, intense noises came from inside. They seemed to be fully engaged in their act, not caring that their loud voices could be heard outside. Are they stupid? It's totally audible and disgusting. I quietly opened the door and checked inside. Indeed, the two were in the back of the waiting room. Unaware of my presence, they continued, the sounds of their bodies colliding filling the room. "Have some decency. It's my daughter's funeral," I muttered under my breath, picked up the two's clothes that were discarded near the entrance, and quietly left the room. Anger welled up inside me as I threw their clothes out of a nearby window and locked the door. "Mom, Dad, can you come to the waiting room? I need to talk." I told my parents and also informed my in-laws to come to the waiting room. My revenge was about to begin. Both sets of parents gathered outside the waiting room, the voices of Anna and Harry audible through the door, chilling the atmosphere.
"What's this? Are those Anna and Harry's voices? What are they doing? Harry, what is he doing?"
The relatives gathered in front of the waiting room started to buzz, oblivious to the two who were getting heated inside. Their voices grew louder, echoing throughout the building, and both my father and father-in-law, appalled by the noise, gently unlocked the door. Then, on the count of ready, set, they burst the door open.
"Whoa! That scared me!" Huh?
Startled by the sudden noise, Harry and Anna jumped up. Naturally, they were completely naked, leaving them in a situation where no excuse could suffice. As they fumbled for their nowhere-to-be-found clothes, they wrapped curtains around themselves to hide their bodies.
"What are you guys doing? During your own child's funeral, how could you?"
Having heard what Harry and Anna were up to, both my father and father-in-law turned red with rage, scolded them, and then dragged each of their children out from behind the curtains.
"You realize what you've done, right? What the hell is this? Do you think this is acceptable?"
After berating them, the fathers opened the window of the waiting room, grabbed their arms, and expelled the two, still naked, from the building.
"Don't trouble the funeral home. We have limited time for this funeral, and we can't waste it lecturing people like you. Sorry, but you'll have to reflect on your actions here. You can't go outside naked." "Exactly, the funeral is the priority right now, not you two. Be prepared for a serious scolding once this is over."
That day, unfortunately, it had been raining since the morning. The weather forecast predicted non-stop heavy rain throughout the day.
"This isn't a joke. To do something like this during a downpour, it's the worst as parents. Say whatever you want, but the ones who need to reflect are you two. It's a good opportunity to cool your heads."
Anna and Harry were left outside, enduring the rain, naked, for the duration of the funeral. Since Harry was absent, I managed to complete the funeral within the allocated time. By the time they were found, the clothes I had thrown outside in a fit of rage were already soaked and ruined beyond use. As a result, the two had to borrow clothes brought as backups by the relatives, wearing them to make their return. However, their hell was just beginning. In the car on the way back, there was an eerie silence. Anna and Harry, sitting together, kept looking down, expressing remorse through their posture, but my father driving the car started a conversation with me as if their regret was of no concern.
"Mirabelle, we should gather everyone at the house later to discuss this matter, don't you think?"
I had been boiling with anger throughout the funeral. Naturally, I agreed to his suggestion, determined to push Harry to his limits. Then, the car fell silent again. The only sound was the rain hitting the roof. The two awkwardly kept looking down, silently waiting to arrive at our family home. Upon reaching, everyone got out of the car and headed inside, but Anna and Harry hesitated to move after hearing my father's words. They looked despondent, as if resigned to whatever fate had in store for them.
"Huh? This car."
I noticed a familiar car parked at the entrance. It was Tom's car. He was supposed to be on a business trip until tomorrow and not expected back today, yet his car was there. Why? Entering the house, I found Tom and Terry chatting in the living room.
"There you are.
Been waiting for you." Tom spoke as if he knew what had happened during the funeral.
"Tom, wasn't your business trip supposed to last until tomorrow?" "Well, actually, I didn't go on the business trip."
Hearing this, Anna, who came in after me, reacted to Tom's words, widening her eyes and raising her voice in a panic.
"What's that supposed to mean? Are you cheating too?"
Anna seemed to be trying to deflect the current situation, desperately grasping at straws. As everyone was dumbfounded by those words, my brother-in-law Tom retorted.
Which one of you has the nerve to say that? You're the one having an affair. Cut it out. Shut up. Why did you lie about being on a business trip and come today, anyway? I knew Anna would try something with Harry at the funeral today. Terry gave me the heads up. So, I lied about the business trip to create a situation that would make it easier for Anna.
Tom signaled to Terry. He started fiddling with his phone for a bit, then placed it on the table and began playing an audio recording.
How about we sneak around during the funeral?
That's way too bold, we'll get caught.
I love the thrill of risky situations.
Just once, come on. The unmistakable voices of the two playing from the phone left me and our parents speechless. None of us knew Anna had such a fetish, and we were all taken aback.
Disgusting, what are you thinking, big sis? I suspected you and Harry were having an affair, but
Anna has always been like this.
I've known her since junior high school, and she's always been messing around with various guys because she thinks she's cute.
She loves the thrill and does it in weird places, always ending up hated by everyone afterward.
I've been hearing stories about her behavior for a long time.
As Terry spoke, Tom stood up, approached Anna, and thrust a piece of paper into her chest while yelling.
We're getting a divorce. I've been gathering evidence with Terry ever since I suspected your actions, and it turns out you were just using me.
Tom then handed me a similar piece of paper. Mirabelle, you should divorce him too. I'm disappointed in these two.
The more I looked into it, the more flaws I found. There's no love in them.
The paper he handed me was an actual divorce paper. I had sensed my husband was cheating but hadn't thought about divorce until then. Handing me the divorce papers made me feel conflicted, but as I thought about my sister and husband's affair, my anger resurfaced, and the idea of divorce became clear.
Maybe divorce is for the best.
Someone who would ignore our departed child for their desires isn't fit to be a parent. At that moment, something in me snapped.
I thought you were a good person at first, but I can't stand someone who doesn't love their child.
Let's get divorced. Like my brother-in-law, I slammed the divorce papers against my husband's chest and declared divorce.
Why? This was just a moment of weakness. It's not like it was an affair. Stop making excuses. We have plenty of evidence, photos, voice recordings, videos. You hurt my beloved Mirabelle, you're no friend of mine.
Terry said this and then tossed photos of the two meetings in secret onto the table in front of us. The photos were clearly dated, and upon closer inspection, the date matched the day Harry said he was hanging out with Terry. As I looked at the photos, Terry started playing a video revealing that the two were meeting in unbelievable places.
The most unbelievable part is Anna's behavior. You were bold enough to meet up at your parents' house without getting caught. And you were meeting at Harry's family home too.
Seeing the video Terry was playing confirmed what he was saying was true. At that moment, I felt more disgusted than angry.
Disgusting. Big sis, were you really swayed to do all this? Harry, you're out of your mind. No, I mean, once we tried it, surprisingly, well, the worst.
Driven by anger, I slapped my husband. My husband, holding his cheek in shock, and everyone around us froze. This scene was truly a battleground. Both my husband and sister shrank under the weight of the situation, powerless.
And while we're at it, let me say everything. Anna, you've always liked Harry, haven't you? I haven't forgotten when you came to me in high school saying you liked Harry. So you got closer to Mirabelle after she started dating Harry and made moves on him, trying to steal him away. Stop it! And you even dated and married Tom, the second guy you liked, just to use him. All along you were after Harry. Stop it, please!
It's the truth, isn't it?
I heard it all from your friends. Enough already!
Unable to bear Terry's words any longer, Anna lunged at him to shut him up, but Tom restrained her.
Let me go. Why should I be the one getting all the blame? This is ridiculous.
As Anna struggled in Tom's hold, my father stepped in front of her and slapped her cheek.
Enough. The only one to blame for being called out is you. Because of Harry. Just because you like someone, you think it's okay to steal someone's husband? That's what's wrong here. And Harry, why did you go along with Anna's advances? This is both your responsibilities, so make sure to sign the divorce papers.
My father's words instantly calmed the two down. Previously defiant, they now became meek, sat down, and began to show remorse to us. I'm really sorry. It was all my fault. Please, let's not go through with the divorce. I truly do love Tom.
I'm sorry, please forgive me. I was foolish to be swayed by Anna, I admit that. I'll reflect on this. Please, let's not divorce. I truly love Mirabelle.
No way. Their last words were spoken earnestly to us, but our minds couldn't be changed. No matter what they said, my feelings wouldn't change, so my brother-in-law and I both firmly stated our stance. Feeling that they couldn't persuade us to retract the divorce, they reluctantly signed the divorce papers. The parents around us felt a sense of resolution, starting to suggest we have some tea as if to move on, but there was still one person whose anger had not subsided. Terry. Don't think you can just walk away from this. I'll expose everything you've done right here. His eyes were filled with a fury like that of a demon. Showing a deeper anger than my brother-in-law or I, he threatened the two.
Why do you have to be so angry? I'm the one who's been messed around the most by you two, especially by Anna and Harry. You've always come to me with your love problems, saying you like Anna or you like Harry, then you go and make such a mess with a misguided marriage. What was all my patience for, then? Ridiculous. Hey, Terry, what are you talking about? These two have been mutually interested from the start. Despite that, they never showed any signs of getting together even when I gave advice, and then, Harry ends up saying he fell in love with Mirabelle and is marrying her. No way! Why? How did it turn out like this?
Terry's revelation made them shrink even more. Bringing up things from our junior high school days, they were mortified.
Shut up, I was just too shy to confess back then. I felt the same way, you know. I was popular, but I never confessed to anyone because I could never bring myself to confess to someone I truly liked.
Despite their defiance just moments ago, both of them were now blushing so red, one might think they had paint on their faces. Being reminded of their past must have been overwhelmingly embarrassing for them.
Why would you bring up such a topic now? We've already decided on the divorce, isn't that enough? Bringing up such embarrassing things out of the blue is the worst.
For me, it's perfectly relevant. If you're embarrassed, then that's exactly what you deserve to expose your shame right here. Terry's anger was so intense that no one could calm him down. Both our parents and in-laws could do nothing but listen in stunned silence, showing no signs of intervening. Also, I heard Anna was frequently visiting Mirabelle's house after she and Harry got married. You met in secret with Harry then, didn't you?
What? No way, from that time?
Here, this is the evidence.
Why do you have photos from that time?
It was just by chance, right around the time of your wedding. Walking hand in hand through the districts, anyone would be suspicious. Seeing the photo, Harry looked at me with a panicked expression. Thinking he had convinced me it was all Anna's doing, his face suddenly tensed up.
What's this about? You've been cheating since then? Well, your hesitation says it all.
Just as I thought my anger had subsided with the divorce settlement, unexpected information reignited it, and I slammed my hands down in front of my husband in a threatening manner. I'm sorry, it was just a moment of weakness. I've liked Anna since the past, but since I couldn't confess, I settled for dating Mirabelle. But I couldn't fully give up, and when Anna approached me.
So, you just followed along. You settled for me. That's ridiculous. I genuinely loved Harry back then.
Tears welled up in my eyes from the sheer frustration. Knowing the reason behind our relationship, that it was just because he couldn't be with my sister, made me realize there was absolutely no room for sympathy for these two. But frustration was welling up inside me, and tears started flowing from the corners of my eyes naturally.
Ridiculous, so I was just a tool for both of you. Why did you have me bear a child, then? Give me back my child's life. It's all your fault.
I broke down crying right there. Feeling used by my sister and husband filled me with disillusionment. Protecting me, Terry hugged me and said, "It's okay now," as he wiped away my tears and comforted me.
I feel the same as Mirabelle, feeling like I was used by you too. I don't ever want to see your faces again. Get out of here.
Hearing those words, I glared at my husband and voiced my feelings as strongly as I could.
I'll never forgive you, prepare yourself.
My husband, intimidated by my piercing gaze, muttered a small sorry. My words made the atmosphere in the room instantly heavier, and our parents, who had witnessed everything, looked at the two with disdain. They couldn't stand being in the room any longer due to the pressure and shame, and hurriedly grabbed their belongings to leave the house. Later, my sister contacted me to apologize, saying, "I'm really sorry, but my parents didn't forgive her and kicked her out of the house." Harry also tried calling the in-laws' house but wasn't heard out and ended up being kicked out as well. Eventually, the two, having nowhere to go after rushing into marriage based on past feelings, found themselves incompatible and often fought, leading to divorce, as I heard from a friend.
They got what they deserved, using people for marriage like that.
Serves them right. Really, serve them right.
We might be victims too, but Tom got the worst of it, being used by Anna for marriage, especially being her second choice. Stop, that's the hardest part for me.
My bad. Harry was cut off by friends, and instead, I became close with them. Then, at a drinking party one day, Terry gave me a ring.
I've actually liked Mirabelle since the past. I wanted to confess but couldn't, and after she started dating Harry, I supported her from the shadows. But now I can say it. I want to be with you, and I'll never do what Harry did. You were late, huh? I kind of knew, though.
Thank you.
What? When you protected me, I felt it. You must like me, right?
Terry's face turned a slight red, and he nodded slightly. I returned his gesture with a smile, and then Terry slid the ring onto my finger, saying,
"Marriage is in the future, this ring is like a promise for that. So please cherish it. I'll definitely propose to you."
3 years after Terry and I started dating, he proposed properly, and we got married. Inspired by us, Tom also found a new partner and got married, and now we all enjoy going out together as couples. I filed for damages against my ex-husband Harry for the mental anguish he caused, and the claim was accepted, allowing me to receive a small amount of compensation.
It's good you got some compensation, even if it's just a little.
Really, including everything with the child, I took quite a mental hit. It's only fair. After we got married, we've been living happily with my parents. Thinking back, I can't imagine getting along this well with my parents if my ex-husband had been the one to join the family. I feel it was definitely the right decision to marry Terry.
What on earth is happening?
As my nephew and I stand dumbfounded on the sandy beach, the cruiser carrying my husband callously sails away, leaving us stranded on this deserted island. We were here for a family trip, supposed to enjoy camping. I had planned to create some beautiful memories for my adorable nephew. Now, left to behold this unbelievable scene, I could only stand frozen, powerless. My name is Nancy. I'm 37 years old and live with my husband, whom I've been married to for a few years now. We don't have any kids yet. Before getting married, it was just my younger sister, Emily, and me. Our parents, who were my everything, passed away simultaneously in March, just as I was about to graduate from high school. They were killed in a sudden car accident. At that time, Emily was only a 14-year-old middle school student. I wanted to do whatever I could to send Emily to college, so I started working immediately after my high school graduation. Emily studied hard, making use of every available moment, and using scholarships, she successfully graduated from college. Afterwards, Emily found a job, married a man she met in college. And drawing on her work experience, she and her husband started a business which turned out to be a great success. When Emily came to announce her engagement, she looked apologetic, saying, "I am getting married and becoming happy thanks to you, while you have not yet, but none of that mattered to me. I was just overjoyed to see my beloved sister finding someone she loved and intending to live a happy life with him. 2 years later, my nephew, named Scott, was born. Seeing Emily, surrounded by her new family and smiling happily, was all the satisfaction I needed. I met my current husband, David, a little while after Scott was born. We were introduced through a mutual friend. From the stories David told me when we started dating, I gathered that he didn't have a good relationship with his parents. They didn't support his wish to go to college. So he used student loans to attend, and is still repaying them. Both David and I come from complicated family backgrounds and have struggled with money for a long time. I think these shared experiences were what brought us together. I accepted David's proposal without hesitation. Since most of his earnings go towards repaying his student loan, I'm the one who contributes more to our household expenses. But I have no complaints about that. Rather, as two people who have faced hardships, we want to support each other and live our lives together. I have only met David's parents once, during our pre-wedding introductions, and haven't seen them since. I remember an awkward atmosphere hanging in the air at that meeting. Even though we can't afford luxuries, I felt a modest sense of happiness in our life. But then, a shocking incident occurred. I received a sudden call from the police, informing me that Emily and her husband were involved in a car accident. Emily and her husband passed away suddenly, leaving only Scott behind. Stunned, I left work early and hurried to the hospital where their bodies were kept. There, in front of the mortuary, sat a boy on a bench all alone. It was Scott, Emily's only son. There was nobody with him, he wasn't crying, and he just sat there looking anxious. Seeing Scott like that, I couldn't help but hold him tight. And I decided then and there that I would not let this boy be alone, that I would make him happy in place of my sister and her husband. When I brought Scott home, my husband didn't bother to hide his sour face. I had pleaded with David, who was cold towards Scott, many times, please stop behaving like that. At some point, he seemed to have developed affection for his nephew, and one day, out of the blue, he agreed to live together.
He's Nancy's beloved sister's child. We need to make him happy.
While I found it puzzling that David could so suddenly change his mind, I took advantage of his change of heart and proceeded with the adoption. Scott would often show me his smile and seemed to bond well with me, but with David, he always seemed a bit distant. David's initial attitude towards Scott was very cold, and above all, Scott had just lost his biological parents. Until Scott calmed down, I decided to let things happen naturally, without pushing him. Additionally, Emily and her husband had left a considerable amount of inheritance for Scott. However, I decided it would be best to let Scott decide what to do with the money when he gets older, and until then, I decided not to touch it. Without David knowing, I prepared a safety deposit box and stored all documents related to the bank book, checks, and inheritance. By the way, Scott would sometimes stare blankly into the distance. There were also times when he appeared to be listening to something while staring at nothing. I had some idea about this. Emily once said, Scott seems to be able to see and hear things we can't. However, I found it hard to believe at the time and brushed it off. This went on for a few months. Then, David suggested that we take a trip.
I'm thinking of going to a campground on an isolated island by cruiser. They have all the facilities there. That sounds fun. But isn't the cruise expensive? You don't need to worry about that. A friend of mine was supposed to go, but something came up and he gave it to us at a very cheap price.
Seeing David so happy, I slowly warmed up to the idea. I thought it would be a great opportunity for Scott. I hoped that cruising and camping would help change his mood.
Well, let's get ready then.
As David cheerily left the room, Scott watched him go with a surprisingly cold gaze.
Scott, what's wrong? Aunt Nancy, there's something I want to tell you, but we have to keep it a secret from Uncle David.
With that, Scott showed me something that looked like a voice recorder. And the conversation that played from it left me stunned. On the day of the trip, the cruiser carrying us left the harbor early in the morning. When we arrived at the island, David was the first to disembark and helped Scott and me off the cruiser.
Nancy, watch your step there. Oh, thank you.
Scott, be careful not to trip, okay? Yeah. Seeing David in such a good mood, I was both bewildered and happy. After all, it was our first family trip together. I wanted to make many wonderful memories for Scott.
David, I'll unload the camping gear from the boat. You two go ahead and find a good place to pitch the tent. Okay.
Holding hands with Scott, I walked away from the ship. Once he saw us leave, David went back to the ship and began talking to the cruiser driver. And then...
What?
Unbelievably, my husband didn't disembark from the cruiser. Instead, he left Scott and me on the island, and the cruiser began to speed off into the open sea. In no time at all, the ship had disappeared from sight.
What on earth is happening?
I was completely at a loss for what was happening and mumbled these words to myself. "Nancy, it's okay," Scott said.
But... Mom said someone would come soon. Mom? Emily? Emily said that?
Scott nodded emphatically. It reminded me of something Emily once told me. Scott seems to have some kind of mysterious power. He can see auras of good and evil in people and things, and recently, he seems to be able to predict the near future, albeit vaguely. Predictions about the near future like a package will arrive soon, or someone will come around the next corner. The details of these predictions are often vague, but they pertain to the near future. When Emily told me this, I didn't really believe her. Surely not, I thought. Yet, in this situation, I clung to Scott's words. With a surge of hope from Scott's words, I decided to first protect myself from the heat of this midsummer day and moved to a shaded area where there was a breeze. I conserved energy by moving as little as possible. Luckily, we had a flask of tea in Scott's backpack, and we shared it.
Scott, are you okay? You don't feel sick or anything, do you? I'm fine. What? Nancy, look! They're coming!
In the direction Scott was pointing, I could see a small motorboat approaching. It seemed to be manned by 3 teenage boys. They looked extremely surprised to see us camping with only one bag. Of course they were. Apparently, they were having fun fishing in their parents' motorboat and visited various fishing spots. Fortunately, the deserted island we were on was one of the spots they frequently visited. Of course, the island is privately owned campsite and off-limits to anyone not involved. Thanks to their secret fishing game, our lives were saved. The boys let us ride in their motorboat, and Scott and I were able to return safely to the mainland. After saying goodbye to the boys, Scott pulled out a GPS from his backpack to show me. "Is that a GPS?"
I didn't need to call for help because I was told someone would come soon. Emily really said that.
I was confused by what was happening before me. The fact that I was abandoned by my husband. Scott, who claimed to hear Emily's voice, even though she was supposed to be gone. Scott's preparedness. As my mind was in a whirl, my phone suddenly rang.
This number. Hello?
As the story on the other end of the phone unfolded, my head, initially in turmoil, began to cool bit by bit.
Yes, I understand.
My body couldn't stop shaking with anger.
I can't believe he would stoop so low.
I absolutely won't forgive him. After what he's done to Scott and me.
An eye for an eye. No, we'll give him triple what he gave us.
After that, I made a call to certain people, explaining the situation. The next day.
Phew, I'm beat. You're late, aren't you? What, Nancy? How are you here?
My husband returned home leisurely, unaware that we had beaten him to it. The call that had come in when Scott and I landed was a report from the detective agency I had hired before our trip. The day my husband invited us on the trip, the voice recorder that Scott had shared with me had captured my husband discussing financial matters with someone.
Nancy, I feel like he is up to no good.
I was surprised that Scott even had a voice recorder, but what my husband was discussing was even more shocking. With a bad premonition, I decided to look into our joint savings account. And there was barely anything left. My husband had withdrawn the money without my knowledge. Shocked, I wanted to confront my husband right away. But I suppressed that urge, thinking it was best to first get solid evidence, so I decided to hire a detective agency. It was during the cruise trip before this report arrived that Scott and I nearly faced danger. After receiving the report from the detective agency, I immediately contacted my husband's parents to explain and confirm the course of the incident and the contents of the report. Upon hearing my story, my in-laws said, "We'd like to be present when you talk to David," and immediately made their way over here. That's how we got to this point. And there was another man present whom I had contacted.
Why are my parents here? So, you reported that Scott and I went missing, that we fell from the cruiser? How thoughtful of you. That's. But we didn't fall from the cruiser, you left us on the island.
My husband was pale and drenched in cold sweat, trying to think of some excuse. In addition to this incident, It seemed like my in-laws had something they wanted to confirm with my husband. According to the report from the detective agency and my in-laws, my husband had not been repaying his student loans at all. The truth was that he had a massive debt from gambling in his college days, and had asked his parents to cover the repayments on the condition of monthly payments. The reason he had been telling me he was estranged from his parents was entirely due to this debt, and he had cut off visits to his family so I wouldn't notice the delays in repayment. Moreover, for about the last year, those repayments had been delayed. And there was another reason for that. My husband was smitten with a certain club girl, and was splurging on her as if money was water. Because of this, he was not only unable to make repayments to his family, but he also spent our savings.
What the hell is going on? Will you explain it now?
Surrounded from all sides and with no way out, my husband finally gave in and began to talk.
She had a gangster boyfriend.
Apparently, the girl and her gangster boyfriend had repeatedly demanded hush money to keep their affair secret from me and our parent company. In other words, he had been trapped in a scam, played like a sucker. At first, he was paying out of his own salary, then moved on to our savings. According to him, when he was running out of money and panicking, I happened to mention wanting to take care of Scott. Initially, he thought it would be impossible to take on another child when they were so strapped for cash. However, when he found out the child was the son of my sister and brother-in-law, who had been running a business, he thought he might be able to make use of their wealth.
But no matter how much I searched, I couldn't find the passbook containing the inheritance. I thought if Scott, the supposed inheritor of the inheritance, and his guardian, Nancy, disappeared, the property would become mine.
His selfish reasoning left both me and his parents flabbergasted. Despite this, David insisted that he was a victim.
I was constantly extorted by gangsters. I'm a victim too, right? Right.
Another person present at the scene quietly said to him.
Enough is enough.
His quiet but powerful words filled with anger silenced David, who had been shouting until now.
First of all, there's no way such selfish reasoning would work. And there's no reason why you, who has nothing to do with this, should say such things to me. This is Mr. Stevens, a lawyer.
Ah, lawyer. Mr. Stevens was a close friend of Emily's husband. Since Scott was born, Mr. Stevens seemed to have adored him very much. Even after Emily and her husband died in an accident, he seemed to be very concerned about what happened to Scott. And when it was decided that Scott would be taken in by me, it turned out that he had provided him with a GPS and a voice recorder.
Scott, we don't know what's gonna happen from here on out. So, I'll give you this, he said. What is this? Scott asked. If you feel like something bad is about to happen, use this recorder to keep some evidence. The GPS here is set up so that if you press this button, it'll tell me your location on my phone. I understand. Scott, listen well. If anything happens, don't hesitate to call on me.
It was thanks to Mr. Stevens that Scott could record suspicious conversations of my husband and have the means to call for help using the GPS, if necessary. And that ended up saving not only Scott but me as well.
Scott is very important to me. I'll never forgive you for putting him in danger.
My husband, unable to respond, just fell to his knees. Without any will to resist left, my husband was taken away by the police officers that Mr. Stevens had called. Later it turned out, the driver of the yacht was a gambling buddy of my husband's. He had apparently persuaded his friend that if the plan went well, they would make a lot of money, and got him involved in this scheme. The man was also sentenced to heavy punishment for his involvement in this murder and several other crimes. As for the girl who triggered this whole commotion and her gangster boyfriend, they were already on the police radar as habitual con artists. My husband's arrest led to their arrests as well, Mr. Stevens told me later. After my husband was arrested, I immediately filed for divorce. And so, I started living alone with Scott. Raising a boy was challenging and I often felt lost, but with the help of those around me, I managed to make it work. As for Scott's mysterious powers that greatly helped solve this case, it seemed to gradually disappear as he grew up. He doesn't hear voices of invisible people or see auras anymore, Scott tells me with a smile. Although I feel a twinge of sadness about it, seeing Scott smiling happily brings me great contentment. Mr. Stevens, who adored Scott, seemed very worried at first about me managing the inheritance as Scott's guardian.
Aunt Nancy is fine, Scott assured him. Really? Why do you say that? Because Mom said so. She said she would definitely protect me, Scott replied with a grin.
It seems he took Scott's words to heart. Before long, Scott started to beg to go out and play with just the three of us. Now, Scott watches with a happy, slightly mischievous face as Mr. Stevens, who has now completely warmed up to me, and I talk. Whenever I asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Scott would dodge the question with, "It's nothing." And at those times, Mr. Stevens would invariably let out an awkward, strained laugh. After several such exchanges, one day Mr. Stevens proposed to me, mentioning the prospect of marriage. Shocked, I asked Scott, "Did you know this was going to happen?" To which he replied with his usual evasive smile, "Who knows?"
Shut up. You, as a woman, should just listen to what I say.
Just a few minutes ago, my sister's husband, who had been polite in front of me, was wearing the mask of a good-natured, friendly husband. I witnessed the moment that mask was peeled off. Both my sister and I were left speechless by the drastic change in him. He started stomping his feet loudly, and without any attempt to hide his irritation, he began to spit out his true feelings.
It's all her fault for not being able to get pregnant. I'm keeping this useless woman who can't have a child in my house without divorcing her.
These words were thrown at my sister. Pointing at my sister, he added more abusive language as if to rub salt in the wound. Despite being verbally abused, my sister didn't respond to her husband's harsh words. She was trembling, gripping her hands tightly, and enduring his anger silently. My sister had been desperately trying to conceive a child every day for the sake of her husband and his family. My sister, who had been constantly tormented by her husband and parents, was ragged, with messy hair, terrible dark circles under her eyes, and bitten-down nails. It was painfully obvious that she had fallen into a mental health crisis, barely managing to maintain the bare necessities of life. As for her husband, his words became increasingly harsh and brutal as he continued to hurl insults at her, calling her useless.
This woman's role is to have a child. I'm generous enough to provide for a failed wife who can't even do that.
Instead of showing any concern for my sister, her husband continued to insult, belittle, and scorn her. And his parents didn't even attempt to reprimand him. My dear sister was enduring this terrible environment alone, unable to ask for help. It was unbearable to see my sister in such a pitiful state. My name is Mia Parker. I'm married now and live with my husband, but until a few years ago, I lived with my sister Emma. Our parents died in a car accident when I was about to graduate high school. At that time, Emma was in the 6th grade. While our relatives sympathized with us, none of them offered any practical assistance. So I gave up going to college and got a job at a local company to support our living. From then on, Emma and I supported each other and lived desperately. I might be a doting sister too much, but Emma was my pride and joy. She was beautiful with an attractive face and a great figure that attracted people's attention. Moreover, she had a kind personality and treated everyone equally. She was popular with both sexes and was frequently asked to date. Despite this, she was humble, never neglected her efforts, and her grades were much better than mine. That's why I wanted to send Emma to college, even if I had to give up my own education. Eventually, Emma, with her hard work, won a scholarship and went to a college where she could get a nursing qualification. When she graduated and got a job at the affiliated hospital of the university she graduated from, we celebrated together modestly. At that time, Emma wrote a letter to me.
All that I am today is thanks to you, Mia. I really appreciate it. From today, I'll work hard like you, too.
I cried when I read Emma's letter. I was happy that our efforts were rewarded, but more than anything, I was happy to receive words of gratitude from Emma. After that, we were both lucky to find partners, and we both got married.
We're gonna lead separate lives from now on, but let's both be happy with our husbands, okay? Yeah, we'll definitely be happy.
Emma and I shared the smiles with those words on the eve of the day when we would finally be apart. The last time I saw my dear sister's smile was that day. After getting married, Emma moved to a distant town to live with her in-laws.
I'm worried about you, moving to a place where you don't know anyone and only have your husband to rely on. It's gonna be fine. I'll be sure to keep in touch, so don't worry, Mia.
You promise?
let me know if anything happens, actually, even if nothing happens, okay? Yeah. You too, Mia.
Since meeting directly was quite difficult due to the distance, our communication after her marriage turned into text messages. I was busy with work and seldom had the chance to talk on the call. While I missed her voice, I held back from calling, figuring she had her own life there. Looking back, that was a mistake. I started to notice something off in Emma's text messages about a year after she started living with her in-laws. Her brightness was fading. Whenever I asked if something was troubling her, she'd brush it off, saying, "I'm totally fine." Eventually, she stopped replying to my messages altogether. The messages are marked as read but not replied to. This was decidedly strange, and when I tried calling her directly, she never picked up. So, I called Emma's in-laws' house directly.
What? Emma. She's doing great. Really? She used to reply when I sent her a text, but now she only reads them and doesn't respond. Oh, she doesn't? I see. And she's not answering my phone call, no matter how many times I call. Could she be sick and unable to answer it?
Okay, well, she's fine, really fine. I'll tell her to call you back next time, okay? Goodbye. The call abruptly ended. She hung up on me. Something was off. This was definitely not right. Emma's mother-in-law was acting strange, and if Emma was really okay, she could have connected the call to her. I discussed this with my husband. He suggested, "You should go check on her soon." So, I requested leave from my office, and the next day, I headed to Emma's in-laws' house. Emma's in-laws lived about a 4-hour drive from my house. Relying on the address from our previous texts, I went without contacting them in advance, and knocked the door.
Hello, who is it?
The voice that came through the window in the back was my familiar sister's.
Emma. It's me, Mia. Oh, Mia. You came. Wait for me.
Then I could hear footsteps coming towards me. Those footsteps were oddly heavy, she didn't need to rush like that. Despite being overwhelmed by the noise, I thought it was good that she seemed energetic. When the front door opened, I was taken aback by my sister's appearance.
Oh, Emma! Mia, it's been a while.
There stood my sister, who had definitely put on weight since before her marriage. This wasn't just a little weight gain from pregnancy if she was expecting. Moreover, Emma had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was grown out and wild. Her previously well-manicured nails now had visible bite marks all over. I had heard she planned to work as a nurse in her new town too. She certainly didn't look like she was working as a nurse. In fact, her condition was so abnormal that it was doubtful whether she could even lead a decent life. At first glance, it was obvious she was living in an unimaginable environment, but I decided to hear Emma out first and went into her home.
My father-in-law and mother-in-law are out, and my husband is going to be late from work.
Oh, I see. I responded.
What brings you here, Mia? Any trouble? Well, you haven't been replying to my texts recently, and you don't answer my calls, so I got worried. Oh, I'm sorry. My husband holds my smartphone these days. I haven't been able to check it recently. What? Since I got married, I haven't been able to get pregnant easily. So my husband offered to keep my phone, saying it might help with the stress. What do you mean?
This was Emma's story. She'd tried various methods to conceive, but as signs of pregnancy failed to appear, she started becoming neurotic. She'd been advised by her husband and in-laws to take a break from work and rest at home. Despite trying various methods, Emma was pushed further into a mental corner when none worked. She couldn't sleep well, lost her ability to think calmly, and even started biting her nails out of irritation. She had also obsessively searched for information on how to get pregnant on her smartphone. Watching herself become increasingly unstable under the influence of the information from the internet, her concerned husband suggested she avoid using the phone for a while. Sure, smartphones are overflowing with all sorts of information. Some are questionable in their accuracy, and others are simply unnecessary to worry about. Emma's husband's opinion that it's better not to obsess over it all seems reasonable. But I notice my messages to Emma are marked as read. This means Emma's husband is aware of my messages and has deliberately chosen not to inform her. No matter how much he's concerned about Emma's health, completely shutting her off from my messages seems like a bit too much. But I was more concerned about something else.
Why on earth are you continuously eating?
Ever since she led me into the living room, Emma had been eating non-stop as she explained her situation. She kept stuffing food into her mouth, immediately grabbing the next piece of food as soon as her hands were free. Although I could see why she gained weight, I had no idea why she was eating this much.
Oh, I follow my mother-in-law's advice. What she suggested? She told me that I can't get pregnant because I'm too skinny. So I need to eat more and gain weight to get pregnant. No way!
Shocked by her reasoning, I couldn't help but yell. It was unbelievable. What kind of nonsense was being fed to my sis by her husband and in-laws? She couldn't possibly continue to live in a place like this.
Emma, don't take this the wrong way, but this place.
I was about to say it was strange when I heard Emma's in-laws returning home. They came into the living room, asking, "Why are you making such a fuss?" Upon seeing my face, their expressions turned ashen. Clearly, they had a robusted look on their faces.
What on earth is going on? You told me my sis was doing fine, didn't you? Well, she's not in poor health. Look, she's eating so heartily. She's the picture of health, isn't she?
Is she? Isn't she just overweight? Her hair is a mess, she has terrible bags under her eyes, and look at her nails, they're all brittle.
Well, that's because Emma is troubled by struggling to conceive a child. Isn't it wrong to force her into this state just to get her pregnant?
My sudden fury left Emma's in-laws in a daze.
Anyway, I'm taking my sister home with me. I can't leave her in this house for one more day. She's only going to get worse. Wait, Mia. Emma? I want a baby. I really want to have a baby with my husband. But even so, it's too much. It's my fault for not being able to get pregnant. So I want to live here, following what my in-laws say until I can get pregnant. If you continue living like this, Emma, you're going to fall sick. That's my fault too, for not being able to get pregnant. Can a woman who can't get pregnant live a normal, healthy life?
Something was off about Emma's gaze. How much nonsense had she been fed all this time? I couldn't ignore the state my sister was in, which was close to brainwashing. I tried to persuade Emma somehow. But Emma kept refusing. No matter what I said, she wouldn't listen to me, and said, "It's my fault for not being able to get pregnant." The back and forth continued, and just as I was becoming exasperated, Emma's husband came home. Upon seeing my face, Emma's husband showed a momentary panic, just like his parents.
You've been keeping Emma's phone, I hear? Why aren't you letting her know about my messages? Sorry to have worried you. I can't leave my sis in this house. I'm taking her home right now. Well, that's a problem. Even if you're her sister, we can't have you meddling in our marriage. How could I trust someone who let my sister get like this?
Despite his perfunctory apology, Emma's husband stubbornly refused to let her go, and my tone grew increasingly heated. On the other hand, Emma's husband, initially nervous against my unwavering insistence to take Emma home, seemed to grow more irritated.
Shut up. You, as a woman, just need to listen to what I say.
He suddenly raised his voice.
It's her fault for not getting pregnant, right? That's why my parents are worried about her and telling her to eat. Who can get pregnant that way? What's with you? If she still has a great figure, she'll go out and...
Seeing Emma's husband's alarmed expression, I did not let it slip.
Go out and then what? She flirts with men other than me. So if she gets fat and unattractive, no other men would look at her, right? So, you're the one who made Emma put on weight? Yeah, that's right.
Emma's husband's true feelings began to spill out one after another in a reckless confession. It seems that Emma's husband was afraid that Emma, who continued to be popular even after marriage, would leave him if things continued as they were. So he had her quit her job under the pretense that she couldn't get pregnant, made her gain weight, and even took away her means of communication, her phone. To achieve this, his parents lied to Emma, saying, "It's for your own good," and cooperated with him. I was speechless as her husband selfishly revealed his reasons. Just then, his cell phone rang, shattering the silence.
What the hell? Not now.
Visibly annoyed, Emma's husband answered the call on impulse. He accidentally pressed the speakerphone button. The phone echoed loudly with a woman's sweet voice.
Hey, you're off work, right? I'm waiting for you at our usual place, hurry up. What? Oh.
In the split second Emma's husband was flustered, I snatched the phone.
Hello? Do you need something with my husband?
Upon hearing my words, imitating Emma, the woman's tone changed.
Huh? Oh, you're his wife? Nice to meet you. Your husband's always so good to me.
Her brazen voice provoked a response.
We are kind of busy right now. Could you call back later? What? You're his barren wife acting so high and mighty.
I didn't say anything, and she continued.
I'm pregnant with your husband's child, unlike you.
A victorious tone echoed from the phone. Upon hearing this, Emma, who had initially been dumbfounded, had a sudden realization. Emma, let me explain, her husband said.
So you've been cheating on me, even going as far as to have a child. You're misunderstanding, this must be a mistake. You act concerned in front of me but betray me behind my back.
Emma's eyes hardened. Taking a deep breath, she declared, "Thank you for everything. I'm leaving this house immediately. Be prepared to distribute property with me." Facing her husband's excuses and her in-laws' dumbfounded silence, Emma pointed at them and declared boldly. Emma, who had left her in-laws' house with me, immediately sought advice from a lawyer who was an acquaintance of my husband. She told the lawyer everything that had happened, and although it took some time, the divorce was finalized a year later. Of course, Emma asked her ex-husband and his mistress to pay for their sin appropriately. Here's a little postscript. The ex-husband, who wanted a child, tried to remarry his pregnant mistress. However, there was a miscalculation. The child the mistress gave birth to wasn't his. Apparently, the mistress was cheating with another man, and the real father was that other man. Emma's ex-husband was desperate to claim that the child was indeed his, but ironically, it turned out he was infertile. So it wasn't Emma's fault that she couldn't get pregnant, but the ex-husband's. The news of the ex-husband and his parents ganging up and pressuring Emma, causing her to have a nervous breakdown. Moreover, the fact that the ex-husband himself was sterile. These facts spread quickly among the neighbors and his workplace soon after the divorce was finalized. Unable to stand the harsh gossip, the ex-husband left his parents and moved to a distant town. Emma, who learned that her inability to get pregnant was due to her ex-husband, was livid. However, that anger seemed to fuel her. She started dieting with an energy as if her previous state was a lie and gradually regained her old figure. Not only her figure, but her natural cheerfulness and kindness returned, and now she's happily living with her new boyfriend.